Nice.
Hey y'all, I'm gonna go ahead and just get started with introductions. I know some people are still checking in at the front, which is totally fine. They can trickle in, and we've got some people online as well. Thank you so much for coming out. My name is Juliana. I've had the pleasure for the past almost 3 years to be the Director of Food Justice here at Fort Oak Cliff. When I started working here, I was a single mom on SNAP and on WIC, and trying to, just like many in our community, make ends meet, especially for single moms and folks with kids. It can be really hard. We, in 2020, when the pandemic started, we started giving away food. We used to be around the corner at Glendale Shopping Center in a much smaller space. And out of our parking lot, we would give away food every week. And we gave away 2 million pounds of food in 2020 and 2021 over 2 years. And that was through a huge volunteer effort. And then as the pandemic sort of started to not end, but trail off, people started going back to work more. We realized that we didn't necessarily need to put food in people's trunks anymore, but we did need to continue advocating for access to fresh food. This is a zip code in Dallas County that has the highest rates of chronic disease, highest rates of diabetes, heart disease, and early death. I always tell people that if you look at the statistics, life expectancy in this part of Dallas is 10 years less than it is 10 miles north of here. And to me, that's a dire injustice. We also know that that predominantly impacts Black and brown folks. And so it's also extremely racist. And so we want to make sure that our mission here, which is to end systemic oppression for Oak Cliff, includes this food work. It includes, getting us all of the resources that we need to thrive. It includes making sure that we reconnect with the land and our own healthy existence and what we need as individuals. I see we've got a few people online. If y'all are just joining us, please introduce yourself in the chat by saying who you are, your name, why you joined us, and if you're in Dallas or somewhere else. I'm not going to talk anymore. I will share that there's a few flyers on the table. One of our interns is having a heart health session on Tuesday to support some of this ongoing work. We have a farmers market starting in May. It's the first and third Saturdays of the month. So come out and support small farmers. That farmers market accepts SNAP and WIC. And also people who use SNAP can get double dollars at the market for free produce. So it's a really great initiative for the community. We also always have volunteer opportunities and ways to engage. So please, if you want to learn more about that, stay in touch. The last thing I'll say is at the end, I would love for y'all to fill out a survey. For things like this, we can offer them for free, but sort of the payback, if you will, is a little bit of data. So just giving us, how did you experience the session? Did you enjoy it? Do you want more of this? That way we can take that data back, look at what we want to provide and how we can get the funding, importantly, to do that. So we really appreciate that feedback from you. And with that, I want to say hi to the folks online. Thank you so much for joining us. I am recording this session. If you don't want to be recorded, please no one can see you all if you're in the space. If you are speaking, it will be recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, just don't say anything until the session ends. But I would love for you all to ask questions and weigh in. And with that, I'm going to actually give it to Marissa. Marissa is an artist who actually brought this program to us. And so she can speak more about what she is doing and then we'll give it off to Mark.
Welcome. Thank you for coming. So excited that we get to share this. Mark happens to be my mentor, and he has pretty much taught me everything I know in the past years about foraging. So this is going to be the first of a few sessions that I do with Fort Oak Cliff. So hopefully I'll see you guys back here again, because the next sessions I'm going to do will be more hands-on, and we will be like kind of mixing art and plants, because I am a visual artist, and I do find with plants, you need to kind of visually recognize them very well before you eat them. That's like a really important part. So we're kind of going to be combining those. So just kind of keep on the lookout for that. But other than that, this is going to be kind of a nice introduction. If you don't know too much about foraging, hopefully today you'll have a little bit more to go on, and if you join us again, then we'll build on that further. So
great.
Yeah.
Marissa's also painting a plant art mural on the back of our building. So we'll have a beautiful mural with native plants, edible native plants on the back of our building by mid 2023.
Yep.
Okay. Great. Yeah, absolutely. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing. Actually, any questions before we get started? I've talked a lot. Any questions? Okay. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Mark, if you want to pick it up with an introduction and sharing yours, feel free to do so.
All right, you need to give me permission to share my screen here.
That makes sense. That makes sense. You should be able to now that I've started.
Nope. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Multiple participants. Okay, one second.
Please stand by.
Yes, please do. This is really tiny font. So.
There we go.
Is it working?
I hope so. Does it look like it's all right? Cool.
All right, take it away. Can y'all hear okay in the back? Great, good. You can hear. Can you see okay? Okay, great.
All right. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I always like to say every preacher loves a new pulpit, and I am a preacher of this stuff. So I appreciate being given a pulpit to share with you the amazing stuff that's around you. How this will work, I'll do a brief introduction of myself, some safety tips, some other guidelines, and then we'll jump into the plants. So let's just, oops. Why are you not? There we go.
Tiny, but that's him in the top right. I can't get it any bigger.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't need to be seen. I'm not the interesting thing here. Just a little bit of background on me.
All right, go ahead.
As long as you can see the slides, that's what's important.
You can see it.
So, PhD chemist, my original plan was to go into the pharmaceutical industry, but I fell in love with the powers of nature and the natural products, and I devoted my life to studying them. Through that, I've created the website foragingtexas.com, which has over 220 different plants and mushrooms that are edible or medicinal or otherwise useful here in Texas. I'm the author of several books. The most recent one, Outdoor Adventure Guide Foraging, that just covers 70 plants and mushrooms, but it also includes some really good recipes, simple things to do with them. And then finally, I am the herbalist formulator for Medicine Man Plant Co. This is a 3-person company, Texas-based, where we are trying to bring back the medicines of our ancestors with a scientific basis for modern issues. So that's me in a nutshell. Now let's talk about some safety things you need to keep in mind if you are going out foraging. So when you are out there, a lot of these plants are really nutritious, really tasty, really easy to identify. Those are the ones I picked, but there's still some things you need to keep in mind. First off, what might be in the soil? So if the area has been sprayed with pesticides, or if it's a place where there's runoff gathers, you got to keep that in mind. That's not a place you want to harvest. You want to harvest from yards that are untreated and places. The nice thing about this is if weeds are growing there, it's usually a good sign no one's spraying herbicides or anything like that else on the property. When you to properly identify the plant, you want to match up 5 structural features between whatever resource you're using, whether it be my website, some other books, and the plant you're looking at. So as we go through today, I will be pointing out the structural features that you need to be matching on these plants, but you want to match at least 5. One of the things I'm including in this presentation are mimics that you have to keep an eye on. You need to understand that it is illegal to harvest from city parks. These go back to just a general, they want everyone to be able to enjoy the parks, and randomly ripping up plants from the parks ends up with a park that no one can enjoy. So you are really limited to private property. And finally, in an urban environment, it's always good to wash whatever you harvest before you eat it. My personal preference when I'm washing things that I've collected in such environments is just a simple mixture of 1 cup white vinegar and 2 cups water. Swish the plants down in there for 5 minutes or so, then rinse them off, and you're good to go. So just to recap, you need to know what might be in the soil, especially if there's any pesticides or industrial contaminants from runoff. You want to match 5 structural features. You cannot do it in the parks. You are limited to private property. And you want to wash the things in a mixture of vinegar and water just to remove any bacteria or other issues that might be on the plant. So if you can't harvest in parks, where can you harvest? Like I said, private property, talk to your churches, talk to the community centers, talk to people with private yards and businesses. Back when I had time, I had a great deal set up with the people around me in my neighborhood. They did not spray herbicides or pesticides on their yard, and I would keep it free of weeds because most of the weeds that were coming up were things I could eat. So talk to your churches, talk to your community centers, talk to private yards, businesses, see if they're willing to do that deal with you because it works for everything. And if nothing else, it reduces the chemical loading in your neighborhood that is leading to a lot of these health issues. So it's really a win-win sort of thing. It makes the ecosystem better. It makes you healthier. It also helps you connect to the people around you. So it's like a win-win-win sort of situation. All right. Before we jump into the plants, just one last word on the plants themselves, why I picked the particular plants we'll be looking at today. First off, they're extremely common, so you can harvest a whole bunch of them, and a week later, God will have restocked the shelves. So these are plants that you do not have to worry about over harvesting or damaging the ecosystem by taking too many of. These plants are very easy to identify. They have very distinct features that aren't found on other plants. So even the absolute beginner will have no issue with these. They have multiple uses. Most of these will have both medicinal and edible uses. So I'm big into multi-use. I don't like a cluttered life. If something can do a lot of different things, that's a winner. And as I talk about the food uses, I will give you different food ideas of how you can use it. And finally, these particular plants are delicious. The deeper you get into foraging, the more you realize not every food of our ancestor was all that tasty. Maybe very nutritious, but it took some doing to make it palatable. The ones we're talking about today, not a problem. They are delicious. All right, let's jump right into it then with a very common weed right now. Oh, I should also mention all these weeds, I hate the term weeds, but all these plants are available right now in your area. I picked the ones that are available in the month of February in Dallas. So starting with chickweed, this is a very common small delicate plant. It is eaten just raw right out of the ground. Rinse it with the vinegar thing, but it's great just raw as is, as a salad green, on sandwiches, anywhere you would use kind of a spinach sort of thing. It's much more mild flavored than spinach, but it still has a wonderful green chickweed flavor. It's always hard to describe the flavors of plants or foods that no one has ever eaten. Well, none of you have probably eaten. So when I say chickweed flavor, you're just going to have to go out and experience it. Another great use for it is in smoothies. If you are the type of person that makes smoothies, you want to throw the chickweed in it. One of its features is that it adds a creaminess to the smoothie. So instead of being more like an icy Slurpee, it's gone almost like more of a milkshake texture. So it's really good that way. You can steam it, you can saute it, pretty much any way you want to put it. Soups, sauces, sandwiches, anywhere you want. A quiche, a spinach type plant in your food. From a medicinal side, it's also really awesome. So there are compounds in it that have been shown to speed up the healing of wounds. This is really important if you are diabetic, like was mentioned, and you have wounds that are not healing or slow to heal. There are compounds in the chickweed that have been shown to stimulate the healing process. To do that, you just mash up the chickweed, make a poultice, apply it to the wound for 10 minutes, 3 times a day, and it does speed up the healing. If you eat it, just eat it raw, it actually helps loosen up mucus, like if you have a congestion. So it works as an expectorant. It helps you expel the gunk, the lung cheese that you might get from different sorts of diseases or too much smoking, things like that. It has been shown to strengthen the immune system. So always important. One of the things, it's high in vitamins, and it has some other compounds that have been shown to just help the immune system go, oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. Very important. So a really, really good plant, both as food and as nutrition. So the next step is proper identification. And we now come to the what I call the interpretive dance part of the show. So first off, structural features, how the leaves are attached to the plant. So there are basically three different ways leaves can be attached to a plant. Four different ways. So in the case of chickweed, it is what's called opposite alternating. So you have two leaves directly across from each other on the stem, but then when you move up the stem, they rotate 90 degrees and then up again, rotate 90 degrees. So they're opposite each other, but they alternate up the stem. So opposite alternating leaves. If you look very closely at the stem, and this might require a magnifying glass if your eyes aren't so good anymore, but you'll see along the line, along one side of the stem, there will be a line of hairs. Think like the mane of a horse. So the stem isn't hairy all around. It just has a single line of hairs that run up the stem. And when they get from one set of leaves, so you'll have the hairs running up, they'll get to the leaves, and then that line of hairs will flip over to the other side of the stem. So that line of hair just alternates up the stem. It has small white flowers. At first glance, it looks like these flowers have 10 petals. They don't. They have 5 petals, but they're very deeply cleft. So they have 5 V-shaped petals of the flower. So between the opposite alternating leaves, that line of hair, and the 5 petaled that looks like 10 petaled flowers, you're not going to mistake anything else for chickweed. If you don't pay close attention, there are 2 plants, neither of which are poisonous, that you may accidentally mistake for chickweed. The most common one is a plant called scarlet pimpernel. And I'm not going to say the Latin name because I'm terrible at Latin. This particular plant, it has the opposite alternating leaves. It has the same size leaves as a chickweed, but there's no hairs on it. There's no hairs on the stem. And when it produces flowers, it will produce either orange or blue, or orange and blue 5-petaled flowers, about the size of my pinky nail. So not the white things, and no hairs. The other common plant that people mistake for chickweed is called horse herb. And again, this is non-poisonous. This produces little yellow flowers, and all parts of this plant are actually coarse and hairy. So again, if you mistake it, the scarlet pimpernel, it's going to be somewhat bitter. It'll actually be an appetite stimulant. If for some reason you need your appetite stimulated, I have always the opposite problem. Or the horse herb, it's just like eating a hairy paper bag. So you don't have to worry about those. All right, I'm going to stop for a minute now. Are there any questions about chickweed? And I guess I should bring my chat box up again, just in case anyone's putting.
I'll let you know if I see any. No one has questions in the room? Not yet? And I don't see any in the chat, but if you are online and you have some, feel free to either go off mute or chat them in.
And also at the end today, I'll hang around and answer any other questions that pop up to you as we go through it. Okay, next is cleavers. And cleavers are named such because they cleave to things, stick to things. Sometimes people will call this Velcro weed or sticky willy, things like that, but it cleaves to people. We'll cover more of that in the identification part. If you drink Snapple iced tea, made with the best things on earth, cleavers is what they use to get the vitamin C for it. So the main use for the cleavers is as a tea. It's not a good plant to eat raw just because of the cleaving thing, but we'll get into that later. So tea or a tincture, or it is dried and powdered and added to food to increase the vitamin C and magnesium and some other things in the food. So the thing to know about plants for tea, this is where you tap your inner witch's workshop. If you remember, plants have a cell wall. It's a hard, rigid structure, and everything inside that cell is trapped in there. So if you just take the cleavers and put them in water, hot water, you're not going to be able to get this stuff out. But if you take the plant and dry it, harvest it, hang it up somewhere in your house, your apartment, in a cool, dry place, the last thing a plant does is it fires off an enzyme whose purpose is to start chewing holes through that cell wall. This takes about 2 weeks. After that 2 weeks, there'll be all these holes through the cell wall. The water will evaporate it away. Once the water is gone, the enzyme stops, so it doesn't completely break the plant down, but you've basically made plant jerky. But now, when you put the dried cleavers in hot water or in alcohol, if you're making a tincture is just an alcohol form or an alcohol extraction. Now there are escape routes for the vitamin C and the other good stuff in the cleavers to escape into your water, into your vodka. People ask, can I just put it in a dehydrator or dry it quickly in an oven? That prevents the enzyme from chopping the holes through the cell wall. So it's not a good way of doing it. You just want bundles of it around, drying. After 2 weeks, just crush it up, put it in some jars, airtight jars, keep it out of the sunlight. All right, so tea or tincture, from a medicinal point of view, the main thing is absolutely loaded with vitamin C. It's a wonderful source of vitamin C. When you are making tea from it, though, you do not want to boil it. You get the water hot, but not boiling, because over 184 degrees Fahrenheit, vitamin C breaks apart. So boiling 212, it breaks apart really quickly. You don't want the vitamin C broken apart. You want to consume it, as it does so much good stuff in your body. It's a critical nutrient. So hot water, if you're not sure, bring the water to a boil, take it off the heat, let it cool 3 to 5 minutes, and then put a tablespoon of cleavers in per cup of hot water. Let that soak for 10 minutes, strain out the cleavers, let it cool down a bit more to drinking temperature, and away you go. 2 cups of that a day gives you all the vitamin C you need. Another thing cleaver is known as is as a lymph cleanser. So the lymph system, it's the underrated circulatory system of the body, but it carries a lot of the antibodies. It's a big part of immune system. And so it's been shown to help detoxify the gunk that the lymph is pulling in and getting rid of it. Let me just mention one thing here. When I'm talking about these medicinal properties, these are things that science has confirmed. Like I said, as my background as a pharmaceutical chemist, I need that scientific proof before I say this does that. And so what I'm saying, this does that, is because there's scientific proof. Last thing, psoriasis treatment. And again, this has to do with the lymph cleansing. Psoriasis, the skin is one of the ways the body gets rid of toxins. And so if you have toxins building up on your skin, that's one of the things that can trigger psoriasis. So the cleaver tea has been shown to help with that. In that case, though, you're probably talking more like 3-4 cups a day. Identification of cleavers. First, going at the leaves, they have what's called a whorled leaf. A whorled leaf is where you have the stem, and then you have 3 or more leaves in a circle around the stem at that spot. So in the case of cleavers, you'll have anywhere from 5 to 7 leaves in a circle around the stem. All surfaces of the cleavers, the stem and the leaves, have tiny little hooks. That's why it cleaves to stuff. That's why it clings to stuff. It was one of the original inspirations for Velcro. But these tiny hooks is why it cleaves to things. The stem itself is square. So the shape of the stem is a structural feature that you would look at. And cleavers have a very distinct square stem, which makes, again, identification very, very easy. And it has 5 small white flowers. They have 5 white petals on it. And these are, traditional looking flowers, no cleft or anything like that. It's just 5 petals. So really easy to identify. But one of the big things is this: if it sticks to your shirt, there's nothing else that sticks to your shirt. So the mimics. There is one mimic, it's actually related, non-poisonous carpet weed, not very common up in the Dallas area, but it really does look like the cleavers. It has, well, in this case, it does have a round stem, but it has the whorled leaves, so, 5 or more leaves in a circle around the stem. It does have the white flowers, but there's no hooks. It doesn't cling. The cleavers will cling to your skin. When you feel it, you can feel it. It's rough like the tongue of the cat. The carpet weed, it's just smooth. There's no clinginess whatsoever. It's very independent. Like I said, it's edible, but it's not very common up there in the Dallas area. And as far as flavor goes, it's not one of my favorites. All right. Any questions about cleavers? Mainly used as a tea or tincture as a really good way of delivering vitamin C and other really good compounds for the immune system.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I noticed in both the chickweed and the cleavers, you pointed out the flowers. And so I'm wondering, is it only during that part of the plant's life cycle when it's safe to harvest, or at any point, flowers or no flowers, can we harvest it?
Oh, that's a great question. Ideally, you want to get it just before it flowers, but this year you're probably going to have to wait to see it flower to really learn and study the plant. So the next year you're ready to go. But the flowers, in the most part, it's still completely usable. Once it's going to seed, whether it be the chickweed or the cleavers or some of the others, at that point, the plant is focused on creating the seeds. It's stopped making all the nutrients and the medicinal compounds. So best time is just before it flowers. During flowering is still fine. Once the seeds are starting to appear, not the best. Excellent question, though.
Thank
But
you.
the flowers are really a great way of identifying it. And especially on these, you can still use it at this stage. So cool. Anyone else?
Any other questions? Okay. Speak up really loud, okay?
Oh,
So we can hear you.
My question is, you say it benefits for psoriasis. How does it help eczema? Like, what are the beneficial qualities for that? Like, will it help due to that? It's also a issue.
And like, how could you use it for that?
Yeah,
Is that
because my
something
son has
that-
eczema, so I'm like,
What's a practical?
I can make.
Okay, so the question is, since it helps with psoriasis, does it help with eczema?
Yeah.
And the research on that, there has been some, not so much. It doesn't seem to really help a lot there. The underlying cause between the two is somewhat different. And so where it does help with the underlying cause of the psoriasis, not so much with the eczema. If I were going to try and treat eczema, I would go back to chickweed and use a poultice form of the chickweed.
Do you know what
on
poultice
eczema,
is?
where
A
you mash it up into a paste, like,
Okay.
and smear it on the
P-O-U-L,
area.
smear it on, like break it down.
The poultice is like a cage, I guess. It's like you pack the weed together and then.
Google the word
I will.
poultice, Poultice, and it'll show you kind of how to make one. Also, there's some note sheets on the tables, and if you need extras, there's extras. So feel free to just grab other papers. Yeah. Esther has some questions about where you might find them as well. She said, where outside can we find chickweed growing? Sun, shade, clay, sandy soil, or near water?
Okay, so both of these are common yard weeds, but both the chickweed and the cleavers, they have an affinity to grow up against something. So you will find them growing up against the base of a building or against a fence or landscaping rocks or something like that. As far as sun and shade, during the winter months here, the sun isn't beating down on them. They can be found in all the areas. Chickweed does like a little bit of moisture, but it's not like a wet foot plant. So just in your yard, in suburbia, in the urban environment, but generally up against walls, fences, landscaping, rocks, that sort of thing is where you'll find big clusters of these. For whatever reason, they don't like to be completely exposed. Occasionally they will because plants don't read books and they don't know what they're supposed to do. But most of the time you'll find it up against buildings or fences or landscaping rocks, that sort of thing. Good. On to the next.
Yes.
All right. One of my absolute favorites, mallow. Mallow is a nutritional powerhouse. And it's actually related to the hibiscus. It's related to okra. They're all in the same genus, the Malva sort of thing. So where you use mallow, it's not a good raw plant. It has a texture issue. It's a little bit rough. So traditionally it would be chopped up and added into soups and sauces. Again, you can throw it in quiches, lasagna, curries. Don't tell anyone I said this, but you can put it in chili to make chili that much more healthy.
Don't tell anyone in Texas.
Another thing people will do is they will dry it and then throw it in the blender and just powder it up, turn it into a powder that is then mixed with the food. Another thing I really recommend is lacto-fermenting it. So if you're familiar with sauerkraut or kimchi, the fermented cabbage, it's extremely easy to do. It basically needs cabbage, salt, and a plant like mallow chopped up, thrown together, and just let sit. But the benefits of the lactofermentation is you get, again, all the nutrients from the mallow, but you also get the nutrients from the probiotic, the acidophilus bacteria that belongs in our gut. But if you've ever been on antibiotics or something, your gut bacteria is probably horrible right now. So just as a general thing, you should be eating fermented foods just to maintain the proper gut bacteria. But a cabbage and mallow sauerkraut, very tasty. And another thing you can do with it is throw it in the smoothies. And like the chickweed, where we talked about the chickweed adding a creaminess to the smoothie, the mallow does the same thing. So what are the medicinal benefits of mallow? First, treatment for dry skin. In this form, again, you want it as a poultice. So take the fresh green plant, mash it up, put it in your blender, make it like a toothpaste level cream texture, and apply it to the dry skin. Leave it on there 10 minutes, wash it off, good to go. It helps, if you eat it, it helps with soothe inflamed gastrointestinal tract issues. So if you have a sore throat, if you're suffering from ulcers, if you have any other sort of I have to be careful here because I can get in trouble with the FDA if I say it will cure irritable bowel syndrome or leaky gut syndrome. But anyway.
But it might.
But traditional uses, but scientifically said it helps. Also reduces blood sugar and is a gentle laxative. And let me just, it's the same compound in mallow that helps with all these. So I mentioned it's related to okra. It's in the same family as okra. Okra leaves are edible. Okra flowers are edible. Mallow leaves and mallow flowers and mallow fruit are also edible. But if you've ever eaten okra, you know it has kind of a slime to it, a mucilage. Same with the wild mallows. They contain the same mucilage that you find in the okra. And that's what helps repair the damaged dry skin. That's what helps repair the mucous membrane of your gastrointestinal tract to soothe it. The other thing that this mallow does, or the mucilage in the mallow, or any slimy foods, whether it be okra, prickly pear cactus, or wild mallow growing on the street, is that mucilage, it binds tightly to sugar, and sugar has a hard time escaping it. What this does then is in your gut, it binds to the sugar, so the sugar can't get into your blood right away. So it's a great way of controlling blood sugar. Very important in a lot of cases. And then on the other end, if you eat lots of it, it just helps things slide out the other end easier. So the mucilage is just a really, really useful compound. I believe, again, everyone should be eating fermented foods and everyone should be eating slimy foods. But in particular, if you are a type 2 diabetic, because this will help control your blood sugar. Very, very, very important. And if not this, go to HEB and get the jar of the Nepalis, the prickly pear cactus, or okra or things like that. So much better for you.
Iman says,
All right.
so we can eat this after every cookie, right?
Oh, heck yeah. And the effect lasts for several hours. So you can take some in the morning, you can take some in the evening, and away you go. Identification. So it has scalloped shaped leaves. If you know kind of that fan shape, it's a little bit better picture here, but it has a kind of a scalloped shape. The leaves and stems are very coarse and hairy. They're very rough feeling plant. Again, almost not quite like a cat's tongue, but getting close. In this case, the leaves just alternate along the stem. They don't do the opposite alternating. So think zigzagging. And the flowers, if you're familiar with the hibiscus flower, they look like tiny hibiscus flowers. They have 5 petals. They're going to be purple white with stripes in them. So the majority of the petal will be white, but then there'll be purple pink stripes in it. And then later on, it does form little round, they look like flat okra. And that's the seed pod. And you can eat the seed pod too. You do need to be careful of a mimic. And the most common one is the creeping buttercup, which is showing up right now too. It's a wintertime plant. It is poisonous, but it's very easy to tell apart from the mallow. The creeping buttercup has no hair. It's very smooth. It's very plasticky looking. It almost looks artificial, whereas the mallow looks kind of rough and tough and kind of hairy. Kind of looks like me. Anyway, whereas the creeping buttercup, like I said, it's very smooth and slick and kind of looks like it might be edible, but it tastes terrible. And you don't want to eat it because it also, along with tasting terrible and causing some liver damage, it also makes skin hypersensitive to light. So if for some reason you did manage to choke down, several spoonful or forkfuls of the creeping buttercup, the next time you went out in the sun, you would get a very bad sunburn. But yellow flowers, smooth, hairless. That's how you know it's not the mallow. All right. Any questions on the mallow? This is absolutely one of my favorites for so many reasons.
Where it describes it.
Asking if you can go back to the slide that describes it. This one. How big are those little leaves? Is that like a couple centimeters?
Yeah, so they can end up the size of a playing card.
Oh, that's big.
Wow.
Yeah. So when it's young, it'll be like the size of my thumb, but on a mature plant, they'll get quite large.
Great.
Any others?
In the room?
I have a question. Kind of going back to cleavers though, you talked about having to wait for that enzyme to break down the cell walls in order to make tea. Could you break those cell walls manually, like by crushing it, or you really need to just wait?
So yes, you can chop it up, mash it up, rupture it. When you do that, you're going to get all the good stuff out of the things, but you're also going to get chlorophyll. And chlorophyll does have some health benefits for you, but it tastes terrible. I like my stuff to taste good.
Okay.
So you get a much better flavor if you let it age.
Thank you.
Yeah. So there's no reason not to just crush it up, but flavor. Okay. Next is another favorite of mine, cucumber weed. Oh, let me, because people have asked, where do you find the mallow? Roadsides, open, abused, disturbed areas. Places where humans kind of messed things up and then walked away is where you find the mallow. Because one of the things it does, it has a lot of roots that are pulling the minerals back up that have leached down in the soil and bringing them back to the surface of the soil, trying to repair the damage we've done. And ironically, they also repair damage we do to ourselves. So it's a very loving and giving plant. Okay, cucumber weed, as the name suggests, this tastes just like cucumber.
Yay.
It's amazing. It's like I'm eating flat little cucumbers. So use it in salads and sandwiches, throw it in your sauerkraut that you're making to lacto ferment it, even a cocktail garnish where you would sorry, I have the attention span of a squirrel, and I just flash back to an episode of Cheers where Woody had to come up with a new drink, and one of the components of the drink was a bruised cucumber, but ignore that. Okay.
That's old.
Some of you, oh yeah, some of you know that show. But
I was little, but Mark, will you please go back one slide for one of our participants for a second? Is that what you wanted to see? Okay.
Oh, wait, is there one before?
Previous, okay, go back one
no.
more. It was just the mallow, the way it looked.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Got it. Okay, let's keep going. Sorry about that.
okay,
Thank you.
so cucumber weed tastes like cucumber. Use it where you would put cucumbers in food. It's a little small to pickle, so if you're hoping to make little tiny flat pickles, it pretty much just shrivels up and you can't do it that way. But again, the lacto fermentation, like a sauerkraut sort of thing, that's the way to go with it. Or just salads. It is a very powerful diuretic, so it does make you pee, which is really good if you are trying to flush a kidney stone or are dealing with gout or some other thing where you're trying to get toxins out of your body. So very potent diuretic. It does help soothe coughs if you eat it. And it also helps strengthen and support the kidneys. So if you're having kidney issues, it's a really good thing to include in your diet. And like aloe vera, you can crush it up and apply it to burned skin, and it will help soothe that. This is another plant that really likes to grow up against walls. This particular one, you will find more in shady, wet areas. It absolutely loves flower beds, more so than just out in the wild. There's something about flower beds that it just goes, yep, I'm home. This is a good place. So look for it there. Right now, it's still very tiny, but it ends up growing to where the leaves are about an inch long. The leaves, the stem, the flowers are all edible. Generally, I just pull the leaves off because the stem has a bit of a stiffness, woodiness to it when it gets large that I don't care for, but the leaves are always delicious. So this is another one where it has alternating leaves. At each flower, or sorry, at each leaf, it will have a little flower growing from the other side. And this flower will almost be like a green crown. So the petals are actually the same green as the rest of the plant, and you kind of have to look closely at it. The texture is fuzzy, almost velvety. So not coarse hairs like on the, or hooks like on the cleavers, or coarse hairs like on the mallow. It's more smooth and fuzzy. And then if you look at the edge of the leaf, because the way the shape of the edge of the leaf is another structural feature. If you look at it, the edge of the leaf has no serrations or dentata. It's what we call entire. It's just a smooth, intact edge. That is the key identifying characteristic. Because the mimic, that's supposed to be 3-seed mercury, not tree-seed mercury. 3-seed mercury, it is mildly poisonous. It'll give you an upset stomach, but the edges of its leaves are serrated. So it's like a sawtooth. So like the movie Saw, you don't want to mess with it. Stay away with it. You want the nice, smooth, intact leaves. You do not want the serrated ones because this will give you a bad stomach ache. The serrated, the mimic, the 3-seed Mercury, it does have the alternating leaves. It has the flower, the flower at the base at each leaf where the leaf attaches to the stem, but that serrated edge is what you have to look out for. On the plus side, I've never have found these growing together, but you still want to check. So think saw blade edge, bad. Don't eat that. It's not going to taste like cucumber. It's going to give you a really bad upset stomach. Any questions on cucumber weed?
No, not here.
All right.
We have a question in
Is
the
it furry?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go
Is
ahead.
it furry all over, or
Yeah.
just on the leaves?
So the leaves and the stem both have very fine, soft hair. It's like baby head hair almost.
Okay.
Okay, the next one I'm combining henbit and dead nettle together because they are, if not identical twins, they're at least fraternal twins. They look very, very, very similar. The real only difference is the length of the stem that connects the leaf to the main stem of the body. So henbit and dead nettle, these can be used in salads, thrown into smoothies, chopped up in sauces, the whole lacto-fermented sauerkraut sort of thing. Flavor-wise, they taste like green beans to me. Like if you just eat it raw, they taste like green beans. But salads, smoothies, when I say sauces, I mean everything from, Italian sauce to curry, green bean casserole. If you make green bean casserole, you can throw these in there and people, well, they'll realize these are not green beans, but they taste like green beans. When they ask you what they are, you can just say, hey, I got secrets you'll never have. Why not? Or if you can share them, that would be even better. But henbit and dead nettle, both just a green bean, like flat, leafy green beans. As far as medicinal properties, loaded with antioxidants. Antioxidants are critical for protecting the body, maintaining the immune system, protecting the blood vessels, protecting the heart, protecting the liver, anti-inflammatory. So if you're having this one, it's not a great anti-inflammatory, but if you're eating a lot of this over time, you may notice that some chronic joint pain has lessened, or other cases where there's an inflammatory response. It is antimicrobial. It can be used as a poultice to apply to things. It might be worth trying on eczema. I don't recall ever seeing any data on it being used to treat eczema, but it might actually help there, especially in combination with the chickweed. And again, mashing it up into a paste like the consistency of toothpaste, applying it to the skin, leaving it on 10 minutes, doing that 2-3 times a day. Also, it stops bleeding. So the poultice, if you have someone in an emergency situation and you don't have anything to stop bleeding, the henbit and dead nettle have a long history of being crushed up and applied to wounds to stop bleeding. And because it's antimicrobial, it also helps reduce the chance of infection. So good from that way. Think of it more as external wound treatment and interior protection. Identification. So again, both henbit and dead nettle, they have opposite alternating leaves because they're both in the mint family. The mint family all have the same identifying characteristics. So opposite alternating leaves, a square hollow stem. All surfaces are slightly hairy. And then at the top, at the end of the plant, of the individual stems, you'll find the small purple flowers, which I describe as dragon-shaped or dragon head shape. And what that means is you have one lower lip, 2 side petals. On top, you have 2 more petals that can be fused together to one. and you got the stamen sticking out, so it's like a dragon. Rawr. I used to do puppetry. Okay. But I try and give people, things to help them remember. But these are tubular shaped flowers, small, purple, very small. I'm trying to think, like slightly thicker than the lead of a pencil type level.
I like it.
But opposite alternating, square hollow stem, hairy, the purple flowers at the top. As far as the mimic that you're going to find in Dallas this time of year, it will be stinging nettle, in particular, the Texas stinging nettle, heartleaf stinging nettle, which actually is amazingly nutritious. It's probably the only thing that's more nutritious than mallow, but it's not a beginner foraging thing. It's very easy to identify because it does have the opposite alternating leaves. It has a square stem, and if you touch it, it's going to hurt because it's covered with tiny needles that jab into you and inject a histamine, which causes inflammation and pain. But it's very nutritious. Advanced class will go into the stinging nettle. So don't mistake the two. Any questions on henbit or dead nettle?
No, but in person, here Marissa brought some for us, so she's been passing it around. And I just tasted it and it's delicious. And apparently we have a lot of it here at 4 Oak Cliffs. So feel free to, feel free to forage on our land. We have 10 acres before you head home. You can take some with you.
Sweet.
It tastes like cilantro.
It's good. I just tried some.
Okay, next one. Lamb's quarter. And this again is another one that's just absolutely loaded with vitamins and minerals and even a little protein, probably just under mallow as far as nutrition. So this is mainly a cooked green. You can eat it raw, but raw, when we get into the identification, I'll repeat it, but raw, it has kind of a musky flavor. So most people prefer it cooked. You just use it anywhere you would use cooked spinach, from just sauteed in some butter to a quiche, anything like that. Think of it just an absolute direct replacement for spinach. Lacto-fermented. I love lacto-fermentation. You can dry it, or not even dry it. You can just kind of wilt it some and then infuse it into noodles. So if you know how to make just a simple egg pasta, you can mix the pureed lamb's quarter into it too to make a green nutrient-filled pasta, which is really wonderful. And then later on in the summer, it will produce hundreds, if not thousands, of little brown seeds, which are a direct replacement for quinoa, the very popular native grain, because they're in the same genus. So the quinoa and lamb's quarter are very closely related, and the seeds of the lamb's quarter can be used in exactly the same way. So steamed, ground into flour, boiled into porridge, sprinkled on an everything bagel. Seeds are really good. From a medicinal point of view, it has been shown to stimulate the healing of chronic wounds. So again, like chickweed, this is again, you would poultice it, you would mash it up into a paste, apply it to the wound, and let it sit there for 10 minutes, and then rinse it out with some fresh water. It helps in digestion in that it helps reduce gas. Not as powerfully as epazote does. Like if you know anything about Mexican cooking, they'll throw the epazote leaves in a pot of beans, and compounds from the epazote will help break down the inulin that causes the gas issues with beans. Not as powerful in lamb's quarter, but if you don't have epazote, give it a shot. But very, very high in iron, phosphorus, and calcium, which are very, very important, as well as vitamin A, the different B vitamins, things like that. And then going back to the seeds, when the seeds are available, they're 16% protein by weight. For a plant, that's really high. So it's a good source of fresh protein. So identification, we're back to these opposite.
One second, Mark, we had a question. What was your question?
Vitamins, or minerals that it contains. It was phosphorus, iron, and there was
Calcium was the third one. Mhm.
Yeah.
Any other
Like-
questions? Good.
All right. Identification. Alternating leaves. The leaves themselves feel velvety. So not completely smooth like plastic. There's a slight fuzziness to it. The stem, it's angular. So it's not just square. It's almost like octagonal, but there will be ridges running up the stem. So it's like a bunch of flat sides together. So not just a square, but kind of like an octagon with multiple flat sides. One of the key identifying things, though, is where the stem that branches off the main stems meets, or so where the branches come off the main stem, it will be purple. So I tell people, because I love visual things that you won't forget, look for the plant with the purple armpit rot. Because there's nothing else that has that purple there at the joint between the main stem and the branches. And it's a really, really, really good way of identifying it. And if you crush up the leaves and smell it, it has a very musky, almost animal musky sort of smell. That goes away when you cook. So that's why you cook it rather than eat it raw, because raw, it does have a, I won't say pungent, but it's definitely like, the bedroom of a teenage boy that hasn't washed his sheets for a while and stuff. Just that smell that kind of gathers. So very, very easy to identify. As far as mimics go, the only real mimic is common ragweed. And common ragweed is edible. Well, if you're allergic to it, you don't want to eat it. But if you're not allergic to it, it's actually good food. But if you crush up what you think is lamb's quarter, and it actually has a beautiful, wonderful smell, that's ragweed. In fact, the genus name, ambrosia, food of the gods. That's where it gets it from. The smell of the lamb's quarter, the crushed up leaves of the lamb's quarter, is just absolutely wonderful. The leaves themselves are very deeply lobed. So you can see on here, they're long and narrow and have, almost like horns on them. Whereas the lamb's quarter leaves are very broad. Another name for lamb's quarter is goosefoot or goose's foot, because the leaf portion kind of looks like the foot of a goose, with the heel being here and the toes out here. So if you've ever had time to study the feet of a goose, you will realize it looks like lamb's quarter. Not that many people are that into nature, though. Okay, any questions about the lamb's quarter? Wonderful, nutritious. Popping up all over right now. Good plant. Just straight replacement for spinach. If not, nope. All right. Another one I really like is pepper grass. If you like horseradish, that spicy horseradish sort of flavor, you will like pepper grass. So use it on sandwiches, like a pepper grass and roast beef sandwich. You don't have to go to Arby's anymore. You can just throw this pepper grass on there, away you go. You can blend it into mayo, put it in the blender with some mayo and make your own Arby's horseradish sauce. You can, use a mortar and pestle or just a blender by itself and mash up the stem, the leaves, the green seed pods, the root, all of it together to make a horseradish paste. Or you can dry it and then grind it and use it as a horseradish flavored powder or seasoning. I'm big into horseradish. So a wonderful plant if you like that horseradish sort of flavor. Medicinally, also really good. Clears congestion. The mustard compounds are really good at just breaking up and causing your sinuses to drain. Some of you may have grown up with mustard plasters, where they take the mustard seeds and grind them into a paste and smear them on your chest so the vapors just kind of decongest you and soak through you. Peppergrass works in a very similar way. It's been shown to strengthen the immune system to help you resist getting sick. It's very good at stopping bleeding, both internal and external. There's some compounds on it that actually cause the capillaries, severed capillaries, to clamp shut and help also trigger clotting. So it's if you're susceptible to strokes or blood clots, avoid the peppergrass. But if you don't have that issue, it's really good there. It's a minor diuretic. You would have to eat a lot of it, but in doing so, if you can think, this horseradish is helping clear my kidneys, clear my bladder. Hey, another reason to eat it. So identification, the leaves will be alternating along the stem. At the top of the stem, you'll get these seed pods. They'll be like flat little discs, and these discs will spiral up the stem. I've heard people describe the seeds or the seed pods as a fairy staircase because it spirals down the stem, and the fairy would just walk down it elegantly. Going back to the flower for a second, I don't have a good picture of the flower because the flowers are very tiny, but the flowers are going to be white, and they're going to have 4 petals in an X sort of shape. And then coming out of the center will be 6 stamens. So 6 long stem things, well, 4 long, 2 short, with 4 white petals around it. And if you pull it out of the ground, it will actually have a taproot too. Now, if you're going to include the taproot in the paste, wash it well. Just run a carrot peeler or something. You want to take the outer skin off the taproot and then throw it in the blender along with the rest of the plant to turn it into that horseradish paste, because there's a lot of flavor down there in the root, just like in horseradish itself. As far as mimics, the nice thing about this is its mimic is called shepherd's purse, and it has all the same powers, properties, and flavors. The main difference is on the shepherd's purse, the seed pods, instead of being round, are going to be heart-shaped, and the leaves are going to be wide and deeply lobed. But the flowers are going to be the same. The spiral staircase of the seed pods is going to be the same. The taproot is the same. The alternating leaves are the same. The flavor is the same. The only thing that isn't is it has heart-shaped sort of seed pods rather than round. Excellent plant. And this is appearing right now too. Any questions on the peppergrass? It's very distinct. Once you learn the silhouette, you'll start seeing this everywhere. No questions?
You want him to go back to the mimic, or the features of the mimic of the peppergrass? Will you go back to the features of the peppergrass, please?
Okay. Oops. There we go.
This one?
So the alternating leaves, the leaves themselves don't have the deep lobes like the shepherd's purse does. They're just kind of long, narrow leaves. The flat, round seed pods, so not spherical, they're flat. They're like little pancakes on stems that are in a distinct spiral up the end of the stem. And then at the very, very tip is where you'll find the tiny little white flowers. And those flowers will have 4 petals with 6 stamen coming out of the center, but you're going to need a magnifying glass to see that. Good? All right. Next up, wild onion. And this is, again, a favorite of mine. Cool thing about wild onions, Texas has 14 different ecological zones and 14 different species of wild onion. Every ecological zone in Texas has its own wild onion. Use these just like chives. They look like chives coming out of the ground. They just look like a cluster of chives. So tacos. I almost just put tacos, 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 but I decided that would be silly. So, as a replacement for chive, if you pull it out of the ground, there'll be a little bulb that you can use as a cocktail onion, or you can pickle it. The pickled baby onions. At Thanksgiving, one of the foods I always need at Thanksgiving are peas and pearl onions, but I get my pearl onions from my wild onions I have growing in my yard. These prefer shade and somewhat damp areas, so look for it there. High in vitamin C. People don't realize, but wild onions, or onions in general, have the same amount of vitamin C in them per weight as oranges and lemons and limes. Onions are a great source of vitamin C. The wild onions are antimicrobial and antifungal. So if you don't mind smelling like an onion, you can use it to treat things like athlete's foot or other internal or external bacterial infections. So like a bacterial infection of the lungs, onions and also garlic are really good for that. And it's also shown that the more onions and garlic you eat, whether it be wild or domestic, your chance of cancer goes down. So really good there too. Very, very good, healthy plant for you. And all over the place, very easy to gather.
Hold on, we
So
have a question real quick, do you mind?
yeah.
Okay, go ahead, speak up.
When we're talking about vitamin C in onions, I believe you had said earlier that heating it to a certain temperature.
Right. Yeah. If you heat it up, above 184 degrees, you lose the vitamin C. So a quick,
When you
stir fry sort of thing will be okay. But if you're after the vitamin C, you really do want to eat it raw.
Did you hear what he said last? He said,
you really want to eat them.
if you want the vitamin C.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. Mark, are you comfortable with sharing the slides with us afterward?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Marissa already has a copy, but I've updated it. I can send it as a PDF to her that can then be distributed.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, identification. Oh, another question.
Yes, so he'll send it to her, she'll send it to me, and then I'll send it to everyone. Also, when I upload the YouTube video, I'll include a link to it as well, so that it's kind of side by side. Yeah.
Okay, so the wild onion, so it has a bulb, a layered, tiny little onion bulb. It has the hollow green chives coming out of it. Each bulb will have one stalk coming out of the bulb, but then from there it will branch into multiple. But the main thing is it will have a very distinct onion smell. And that is the key for identifying the wild onion. If you find something that looks like a chive or a wild, like an onion, a wild onion, and smells like an onion, it is an edible wild onion. This is very important because there are some mimics. Oh, I forgot the slide. I'm sorry. Now this is what it looks like before it goes to flower and it puts up these wacky things. The mimics look like onions but have no onion smell. And some of them can cause some pretty bad gastrointestinal distress. So you want to make sure it looks and smells like an onion. If it looks like an onion but has no onion smell, just smells like grass, don't eat it.
Would you mind naming some of the most common poisonous mimics, Mark?
Yeah, okay. So in people's yards right now, there is what's called crow's poison. And it really, it has a bulb. It has the stems, the chive-like stems coming up. They're very short. They're maybe 5 inches long at best. But if you crush it up, it has no smell. Also, along Texas roadsides, there's been this big thing to plant wildflowers along Texas roadsides. There is a wildflower that most of the time it just looks like a cluster of chives coming out of the ground. But after it rains, it puts up a flower. It's called a rain lily or a copper lily, and it has a very large, distinct, multi-petaled flower that it's in the lily family. So it does have a bulb. It does have the chive-like stems coming out of it, but the flower is very large. It will be either white or copper colored, and that is very poisonous. But again, if you cut it open, mash it up, there's no onion smell with the rain lily, a copper lily. It also oozes a great deal of slime, but don't eat it because it's poisonous. So those are the main ones you're likely to find in the Dallas area. When they're not flowering, or even when they are flowering, in the case of crow's poison, they look like an onion. And again, if you go to my website, foragingtexas.com, all these are on there with multiple pictures and pictures of the mimics and how to tell them apart from the mimics and all that sort of information.
Awesome.
Is it what's the website name?
Foragingtexas.com, right, Mark?
Yep. Okay. Any other questions about the wild onions?
No problem. Need that information on that as well.
If not, moving on. All right, wild violets. And these are another great plant. During the winter months, you might find them growing out in the middle of a yard, sunny yards. During the summer months, they will retreat back into shady areas. So these are available all year round. After that freeze we had just a few weeks ago, the wild violet sprung back. The very next day, the cleaver sprung back, and one other plant, the wood sorrel, sprung back. But wild violets, these are another really good raw plant. They do have a bit of that mucilage in them, so they're really good in smoothies to add a creaminess to the smoothie. And again, in any sort of sauce. Really, you can think of these as another spinach substitute that can be eaten raw or cooked or fermented. Love the lacto fermentation. Medicinally, very high in vitamins A and C. And since they taste good raw, this is a plant you can just go to town on and eat lots of it raw and get your vitamin C that way. Throw it in salads. I mentioned earlier that slime, the mucilage, is really good at binding to sugar and preventing it from quickly getting into the blood. So the wild violets are another good way of helping control blood sugar naturally, and especially in the case of type 2 diabetics. The mucilage, the slime, also is really good at soothing the entire gastrointestinal tract. Some of you may have remembered, like had a grandma or something that gave them slippery elm when they had like a sore throat or something like that. Same principle. The slippery elm is also high in that mucilage. So the wild violets, much easier to find and use. You don't have to wound a tree to get. The wild violets do absolutely great in pots on a windowsill. So if nothing else, you can just fill your house with, or your apartment with the little pots of the wild violets growing. If you're growing them in the house, you can just keep them in the more shaded windowsills. So on like the east, the west, the north, east and north are best. West, the evening sun, afternoon sun can be a little intense. Whoops. During the summer months, but just regular apartment lights, house lights are enough to keep these things alive. If you eat the root, which you can, the root itself, because of the extra high levels of that mucilage, does again work as a mild laxative. So if you're having some issues there, it can help, like I said, just smooth the process out. So really, really wonderful plant. Identification. The leaves are heart-shaped, very distinctive heart-shaped with the serrated edge. The stem from the leaf goes down into the ground and connects directly to the tuber under the ground. So there's not a stem with the leaves coming off it. Each leaf just has its own stem that goes down into the ground and is connected to the tuber. The flowers are 5-petaled, purple with stripes, about the size of my fingernail. And if you dug it up, the tubers underground have segments. They're going to be like a long, narrow tuber, about the size of my finger, with segments, actual divisions in it. But all parts are edible. The leaves, the flowers, the tubers. But again, if you're eating the tubers, you probably don't want to go on a long car ride. You kind of stick around for an hour or so, just in case. But otherwise, really, really good, raw, cooked, any way you want to have it. Especially, again, if you have type 2 diabetes, which, as we heard at the beginning, the area you're in right now is very high for it. As far as mimics go, the only real close mimic is what's called pony's foot. And the difference, whereas the violet will have a very distinctive heart-shaped leaf, the pony's foot will have kind of a kidney bean or horse hoof shaped leaf. So wild violet, pony's foot. The pony's foot, each leaf has a stem that also goes down into the soil, but there in the soil, there will be a runner. So just a long single root, and then the pony's foot leaves will come up alternating down that underground runner. The pony's foot, no poisonous. It's basically kind of like nature's equivalent of a brown paper bag. When it's young and small, it's very bland. As it gets older, it becomes a little bitter, but there's nothing poisonous in it. But there's also really no high nutritional value in the pony's foot either. If nothing else, you can lacto-ferment it or use it to deflate your stomach. But its main thing is, if you're looking forward to the wild violet and all the powers, you want to make sure you have the heart-shaped leaf, not the rounded pony's foot. Any questions about the wild violets?
I think so.
All right. Last one. So wood sorrel. This is another absolutely tasty one, available all year round, found every month of the year in really across Texas. You can eat it raw. You can add it to cream soups. You can whip it into butter. It has a tangy, lemony flavor. So really, anywhere you would use lemon, you would use the wood sorrel as a lemon replacement. And I mentioned cream soups. A 1/4 cup of chopped up wood sorrel in a standard can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup. It's like magic. You got to try that. It just adds a nice tart tanginess and creaminess that works together really, really well as a complex flavor profile. So raw, cream soups, whipped into butter, anywhere you would use lemon, because it has a very similar lemony sort of flavor.
Sour grass.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
That makes sense. Yeah. How's that sound?
I like what you said, Mark, about putting it, like if you have a can of soup and you're going to eat that, like adding, because then you have that fresh raw enzymes that a can of soup does not have.
Right.
That's a good way to balance out a meal. Yeah.
Mhm.
I can maybe go back a sec. What do you need to see? Just
The best.
Will you go back one? Yes, thank
Let me
you.
work this. Okay, I'm good.
Got it. Okay, you can keep going. Any other questions? Okay, no, no more.
Okay. So these oxalis species, you can find landscaping oxalis. Often it'll be purple like this. You'll find it, in landscaping of places because it's very pretty. It's also edible. It's just as edible, has all the same flavor as the green one. High in vitamin C. It is a fever reducer. So especially if you have a child, if you've seen in the news, there's shortages of things like Tylenol and other things, medicine. This is one of the plants that they used to use. Antioxidants, good for the body. And it's known as a refrigerant. And what that means, it is a plant that helps you deal more easily with really hot weather. It makes you feel cooler when you eat it. So very handy, especially if there's power outages or something like that coming this summer, or after a hurricane and the power is out and you're sweating to death. The wood sorrel will help you feel slightly cooler. I will say, having experimented with it, it's only a minor effect, but under certain conditions, it's better than nothing. There are times when anything that helps. Okay, when people see it, they immediately think, it is a clover. It's not a clover. We'll talk about the difference between the wood sorrel and the clover in the mimics. But the key thing here is it has 3 heart-shaped leaves. So all those shamrocks and 4-leaf clovers you see St. Patrick's Day, those are not clovers. Those are oxalis species. Those are wood sorrel. But 3, if you're lucky, 4 heart-shaped leaves. It'll have a stem. These leaves will alternate off the stem, so zigzag along the stem. The most common one you will find in yards and in urban and suburban areas has the yellow flower. The yellow flower, it's smaller than my pinky nail. It's very small. 5 petals. And then the other really cool thing is the seed pods, and hopefully the picture comes up there well. But the seed pods look like little green rockets with 5 fins around the base and a point at the top. They're hairy. They taste like pickles. So you can eat those. You can eat the flowers. You can eat the stems. You can eat the seed pods. You can dig it up. You can eat the tuber. These also do really well in pots. When my mom was 7, her grandmother gave her a pot of this wood sorrel. She is now 87. She still has that same pot with the same wood sorrel growing in it. I'm not allowed anywhere near it, but it tastes really good. So this is another thing that you can grow in pots. And if you grow it in pots and you have other plants around it, eventually you will have wood sorrel growing in all those other pots. Because the way it spreads its seeds is when these rockets, when the seeds are ripe inside those rockets explode and throw the seeds like up to a foot.
That's impressive.
So, it's really cool. There's some slow motion video of it on like YouTube and so forth. But eventually this wood sorrel will spread to all the other potted plants you have around it on your windowsill. But that's okay because it's so delicious. All right, the mimic, white clover. And this is another common yard weed. It's edible with precautions. The flowers, they look, they have the round cluster of little tiny tubular white flowers. You can just eat the white clover flower right off the stem raw, or you can drop it in hot water and make a tea out of it. The leaves of the white clover, they're going to be somewhat oblong. So wood sorrel, heart-shaped, clover, oblong. And then also on the white clover, there will be a white V, or what we call a chevron, an upside down V on each of the petals. The issue with white clover is you have the leaf, there are compounds in the leaf, and there are compounds on the surface of the leaf. And if the compounds in the leaf mix with the compounds on the surface of the leaf, they release cyanide. It's a defensive mechanism. That's why cattle, though, they'll pull it up and swallow it and then bring it back up and chew their cud, because what they're doing is they're swallowing it And then the stomach acid in that first stomach destroys the compound on the surface of the leaf. So when they bring it back and chew it, it's no longer there to react with the compound inside the leaf.
That was amazing.
So if you want to eat the wood sorrel, if you want to eat the white clover, you actually need to cook it for about 20 minutes in a red sauce, so a tomato sauce. And then the acid from the tomato sauce will destroy the chemical on the surface of the leaf. And then it's fine. So, but it has, the 3 leaves, but like I said, wood sorrel, 3 heart-shaped leaves, tangy, lemony sort of flavor. White clover, 3 kind of oblong leaves, very bland flavor. And you might taste a little bit of bitter almond or cherry from the cyanide. So, but again, the flowers of the white clover, tasty. They're just a nice sweet clover honey almost flavor to them. Really good, and no cyanide. Okay. One other thing I do have to talk about with wood sorrel. So the scientific name, oxalis, and that tangy flavor, that is due to a chemical called oxalic acid. If you are susceptible to kidney stones, your healthcare provider may have warned you to not eat foods high in oxalates because they can form the calcium oxalate kidney stones. But if you mix it with some sort of dairy product, like the cream in a cream soup or the whipped butter, that calcium oxalate forms in your digestive tract and just passes through. You don't get the kidney stones. So if you're susceptible to kidney stones, do not eat the wood sorrel raw. Mix it in the cream soup, whip it into the butter. Okay. Any questions about the wood sorrel?
Not here.
Okay. All right. So that's what I had to present today. My website, foragingtexas.com, and my email, merriwhether@foragingtexas. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me there, and I'll try and help you answer it. On Facebook, Foraging Texas. On Instagram, Merriwhether Forager. And I also have a YouTube channel, Dr. Merriwhether, that has over 100 hours of useful videos, long and short. And then just on my herbal medicine side, the medicinemanplantco.com. So if you have some medical issues, you can reach out to me either through the Medicine Man Plant Co website or Foraging Texas, and I can try and give you some advice there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? This is what I was put here to do. I am put here to preach the benefits of all this food we used to eat that no longer do.
This is
Stick
incredible.
it to the man, stick it to corporate America.
Seriously, all those prescriptions, we got to get off. Do y'all have any questions or comments for Mark before we jump off? Thank you so much. We had about 24 people total, Mark. So thank you so much for being part of this. Are there any questions online? I know someone asked if we could have the lactofermentation class. So I got to find someone to teach that. Is that you? Are you volunteering? If you know somebody, let me know. Okay, that'd be great, because I would love to.
It is super easy.
Yeah.
In fact, I have directions on how to do it on the Foraging Texas website.
That's good.
Yeah.
Great. And then, yes, if you signed up for this and you got my email, then you will get the same, you will get a follow-up with me with the link when it's uploaded. It'll take a couple days. I'll probably do that by Monday. As well as the slides. If you didn't sign up and you want that information, make sure that on your post survey that you write your email and your name so I can send you and include you. If you're online and you have some feedback, feel free to email me or just put it in the chat. And I really encourage y'all to just get involved and come back to future sessions because we're going to continue to have as many learning opportunities as we can. And it's really flexible. So if there's something that you have expertise in, let us know and we can bring it to the table. And I appreciate y'all's time. Thank you so much, Mark.
My pleasure.
I think, hold on a second. Someone's got a question.
Sure.
He does like to go to
Have you been, do you go to the Renaissance fairs?
Yes, I do.
He says, yes, I do. So I guess he's in,
And
at which one? She's saying you should have Scarborough.
oh, Scarborough. So that one's a little hard to get up to because of the timing. I'm hoping to be at Sherwood Forest. And here's the thing. I'm very distinctive. I am 6'5", got the mohawk. If you find me at the Renaissance Festival, I give you one of my foraging bandanas as a
Ooh,
thing. So I always have a bunch of them with me to pass out to people there.
cool. Love it. Great. Well, we'll stick around and kind of leave this open, but if anybody's jumping off, thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I'll send the PDF to you. Well, I'll send it to Marissa, and then she'll get it to you.
Great.
Yep, I'll send it on.
All right.
Everyone can check it out.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right, all right. Once I figure out where the button is.
Same here. I'm gonna stop recording as soon as I can.
Okay. Let's see.
Heading out.
Okay. Oh, there it is. All right. Thanks, everyone.